email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Daniel Harkavy, the CEO of Building Champions and author of The 7 Perspectives of Effective Leaders. We pick up where part 1 ended, talking about the strategic bets perspective. This chapter of strategic bets really resonated with me because so many of the things you mentioned as important are the same things we find important when we do project work. Things like specific and measurable, measure progress periodically, one person per bet as the owner. Why are those important for you?
Bets are risky, and we talked about it earlier. You're not going to have absolute certainty. So since there's an element of risk and there's a chance of failure, let's learn and identify failure points along the way. So you and I both know that organizations will create milestones. They'll create gates. They'll create tripwires. All of that in kind of the stage gate process thinking. So you have to have identified check-in points to where you really ask, are we on track or not? You know, one of my contributors in the book, a friend, Annie Duke. Annie just wrote another book on decision making. She wrote a book, Thinking in Bets, years ago. She's got a fascinating story. Read Annie Duke. But Annie talks about how teams need to do pre-mortems, not just post-mortems, to where in advance you figure out, if we place this bet, what's going to cause it to fail? And you have a robust conversation identifying all of those fail points. That, coupled with identifying your gates and your tripwires, setting specific dates to them, defining what success will look like, what will cause us to stay on course, and what will cause us to pause, or even what would cause us to kill the bet because we don't win all bets. Having that clearly articulated up front helps you to take the emotion out of it and enables you to make more effective, efficient, right decisions. Now, the second thing you asked me was, why does it need to have a leader? And because I'll tell you, you look at all the research done on shared leadership, 50-50, you and me, and I'll share with you a common outcome, which is nowhere near the results you get when one person is ultimately responsible. I'm a huge fan for one person, buck stops here, and then being exceptional at collaborating, getting input, and then shared ownership of the functions and responsibilities in order for the bet to finally pay off.
Yeah, you're definitely preaching to the choir on that one. There's a story I like to share, and it's anybody could have done it. Somebody should have done it, but nobody actually did it, right? I mean, so when you have more than one owner, it's a lot of finger pointing. When there's only one owner, you know exactly who to go to.
You got it.
Yeah, I really love that idea around pre-mortems. So that everybody's familiar with post-mortems, but I thought the pre-mortem stuff was just genius. Now, perspective number 4 was called the team, something I'm clearly passionate about.
Yes,
and in that section, you profiled John Ranelli, a former Navy officer, go Navy, by the way, and turnaround guru. I was struck by the importance he put on listening to his team. What did you find in that?
You see it as a best practice. You know, Ranelli's a stud. Ranelli and his very close friend, these two Johns, Ranelli and McGonigal, they're both in the book. I met them. I spoke at an event, a leadership event a few years ago after the release of my last book, Living Forward. And it was a Tony De La Russa event where the room was filled with these who's who, and both Johns were there speaking. And as I listened to these guys, I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing leaders. You know, the head of our submarine fleet, McGonigal, and Ranelli, who mentored him and still does. And they've had that mentoring relationship for decades. What both of these guys will tell you is that one of their highest payoff activities is to truly understand what it's like to be and see and operate as a teammate. And they're ridiculously disciplined with that. And, Ranelli, he does that in every organization that he's been in and turns around, and he sits with every single employee. There's another great leader here in Portland that did the exact same thing to really understand what the organization's like. And that's advice for a new leader moving into an existing organization. But that's not something that stops. You know, you're always regularly getting input from your teammates. One of our CEO mentors, Tom Brewer, he was a Ford guy for 35 years and ran big divisions of Ford Motor Company. And he just talks about how he would just sit down regularly with everybody in the organization at least once, in a massive organization, at least once in the year. I have clients that have 180,000 employees. They can't do that, but they're very strategic in who they talk to. They move freely all the way through the organization to really understand the team's perspective, from the guy in the mailroom to the receptionist, the director of first impressions, the engineers, the finance guys and gals, all of them. You just need to understand, so that that helps you to also inform current reality, and it informs you as to what bets you should be making or not making. So,
well, obviously the title of the podcast is called The Conversation, and people who have listened to this podcast over the course of this past year are tired of me saying this story, but it's true. We have a saying here in the South where I grew up, which is, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should use them in that ratio. And I just believe that if you're not listening, you're not having a dialogue or a conversation, and therefore you're not really learning.
Well, you and I say the exact same thing, buddy. I say that all the time.
Another thing I strongly believe in, that I think you will concur, is you have to create a culture where the truth is not only accepted, but encouraged. One of the things I see is they'll create an environment where the truth is not acceptable, and then both parties lose, both the team members themselves and also the leaders lose. And you need to create a culture where not only is the truth acceptable, but you actually encourage it. Because to me, getting bad news early is not a problem. Getting bad news that you've known about for 6 months and I'm only now finding out, that's where the problem really occurs.
Absolutely. And, that goes back to our earlier conversation with Frank Blake, people wanting to hide it. They just don't want to share the problems. And you need to celebrate people finding the problems and things. And oftentimes it's hard because, sometimes they're going to find problems with your decisions or your conversations or your mandates or your directives or whatever it may be. You as a leader, you're human and you're going to make some mistakes. And the best leaders, I like that keep, start, stop model, the KISS. What do I need to keep doing, start doing, and stop doing in order to be the most effective leader? What do we as a team need to keep, start, stop? What do we need to do with you as a customer? Keep, start, stop. Great little framework to get truth. You need that truth, and you need to say thank you. No defensiveness. Thank you. Appreciate it. And then you need to be willing to say, okay, I heard, but I also heard on this topic from the CFO, and I heard on this topic from the head of sales, and they do see it a little bit differently. So we've got ourselves some diversity of perspective and opinion. Ultimately, I need to make the decision. And since I've got 3 different opinions, I've heard all of you, I'm going to make this decision. It is going to side with, the CFO on this one. And here's why. And, I hope I'm right, but your inputs helped me. And there's no way for me to come up with the one size fits all, response. So
now in the team perspective, you also talk about intentional one-on-ones. What are they, and are you still able to do them effectively in a pandemic?
Yeah. So I like the questions you're asking. You're allowing me to plug different books, but I wrote a book back in 2007 called Becoming a Coaching Leader. And it was my own coaching journey from banking to starting an executive coaching firm back in 1996 and how we do it. And I wrote the book and I flat out told people, back then I did radio interviews and some TV stuff. And I would just say, if you guys read the book, you'll put me out of business. Like, read the book, do it. Building champions goes away. The business was set up with coaches who are remote. And we've been able to affect transformation in the lives of leaders around the globe for 25 years without being face-to-face with them. Now, we do face-to-face stuff, but the majority of the work's in today's times over Zoom. So one-on-ones need to happen. I'll take you back to Frank Blake and those CEO roundtables. Frank serves on the board of Delta as well as a few other large organizations. And one of the exercises he did early on in the pandemic was to do executive team check-ins to really understand their perspective so he could best support the CEO of those organizations. And I'm going to say we were probably in a roundtable in the summer, maybe it was September. And he was sharing that one of the things that he thought was noteworthy was that his CEOs were doing a phenomenal job communicating out and giving all of the organization information. They were doing great town halls. So you had a one-way conversation happening. And you and I both know that's part of the equation. And what Frank found was that the executive team members in this pandemic were really missing the one-on-one engagement. And they were feeling not only disconnected, but it was hindering their ability to flourish. So Frank's encouragement was, Make your one-on-ones a priority. They're non-negotiable. At Building Champions, we have all of our leaders becoming coaching leaders. So that is a discipline of theirs. And today you schedule them, you're prepared for them, you are on time for them, and they're regular. And you're in there really trying to understand your teammates' perspective, and then you're offering help wherever you see it. And it can be done. It can be done. It can be done very effectively over Zoom or whatever platform you use. I would definitely in today's times encourage that over what we used to use for the first few decades, which was just the phone.
No, you're definitely preaching to the choir there. We strongly believe in having those conversations, because what's missing right now in the remote environment is you're no longer having those organic conversations that bubble up on the way to grab coffee or on the way to lunch or as you meet them in the hallway. And so you have to be more intentional about making sure that those conversations still happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, a moment ago, you mentioned the keep, start, stop framework. Can you dig into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, it's just one of my business partners at Building Champions, Raymond Gleason. He's a CEO mentor as well. He brought that to our organization. He's another guy who was a professor as well as an entrepreneur, and he's a contrarian in everything he does. And the reason he's my partner, has been my partner for about 2 decades, is he and I share the passion of making the complex simple. And he says that 3-question process will give you so much information so that you can then help those around you. So, Clint, you could use this, and you can use this with a teenager. You can use this at home, and I have. Hey, what do I need to keep doing in order to be the best dad to you? I want to know. What do I need to start doing? Give me 3 things. What do I need to start doing? And then what are some of the things I need to stop doing? I really want to know. If you ask an individual that in any context, and if you do it right, keep, start, stop, what you're going to see, if you have somebody fill it out via writing or in a conversation, you're going to see a lot of keeps. And then you'll see some starts, and most of us will see fewer stops. Now, warning.
Not because you don't need them, just people are afraid to tell you.
Well, I think people are good people. Honestly, Clint, I just think people are good. And I think it's, most of us trying to make a positive contribution. I'm sure the people listening to you are, people don't listen to a podcast like yours if they're not serious about making a difference, if they don't have that common bond and desire to make those around them better and to be the best they can be. So I would say any of those folks listening to us, they're going to probably have more keeps, and they'll have a few starts and a couple stops. And then you look at that individual or that team or whoever it is that's giving you that feedback, and you sincerely thank them. And then you get back to them with what you heard and then what you're going to do about it. And it's an incredibly effective, it's a poor man's 360.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love the way you title some of these things, the 2 C's, the 3 B's, the keep, start, stop. I mean, those are things that will stick in my head and I'll be able to remember them easily. Now, this next perspective, called your role, hit a little too close to home for me. You say that as leaders, we often don't have enough time to fit everything into our schedules. Therefore, we need to seek quality over quantity and prioritize. Can you share some tips on how to do that more effectively? I know I could use some.
All of us as leaders go to bed every night. Every single one of us, we go to bed every night knowing we didn't get it all done. Would you agree with that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and that's true. So what makes leaders most effective is they understand what are those activities, those conversations, those areas of focus that are truly the most high payoff. And they are the ones that they and only they can do. Oftentimes we fill our calendars with things that we're good at, but there are others in the organization that could not only do them well at a good level, but they might even be great at them. Or you might be great at certain things, but you have people in the organization that could do those good enough. And if you delegated those and you were more clear on the true high payoff activities that you and only you should be doing in order for you to be the best steward of the role that you sit in. You've got shareholders. I don't care if your shareholders are public, private, family, or you, if you're an entrepreneur. The key is filling your day with the activities that the shareholders are saying, those are the activities that move the needle. You know, your teammates are saying, those are the things that enable you to be the most effective with me. And it's a continual evolving process. We have clients that will time track for you know, two weeks on a regular basis, going 15-minute increments to identify where can they make those little incremental shifts and further delegate, because they want to be more effective executives. They want to spend more time thinking, more time on strategy, more time in conversations, ideating with key constituents, future clients. That's where the leaders at the highest levels, that's where they're spending their time. So you've got to delegate a ton, which means you need to coach a ton. You need to empower a ton. You have to have a lot of confidence in your team, which I know you're expert at. So,
yeah, I think the other thing that kind of holds me back at times, and maybe it resonates with others as well, is you look at it and say, well, I could pass this off to this other person, but then it's going to take me longer to educate them than if I just do it myself. And you're not really looking long-term and saying, well, I make the investment now, it'll pay off in hours saved, later. So that's something I need to be certainly more intentional about.
absolutely. It's just a trade-off it's worth it if the individual has the capacity. You don't want to over delegate to somebody and only cause them to fail.
Right.
Because then you actually lose somebody who could be good, and you end up having to clean up a bigger mess later. And that's why, as you being a team guy, that the organization is only as good as is the executive team. So here's something that we say at Building Champions all the time. Self-leadership always precedes team leadership. Team leadership always precedes organizational leadership. So what we do with leaders is we're focusing in all three of those lanes. How you lead yourself, and it's always something we're focusing on. I wrote a book about that in 2016 called Living Forward, Build a Plan for Your Life so you better lead yourself, fight the drift. How you show up as a human impacts your leadership influence and your decision-making, your energy, all of it. So self-leadership precedes team effectiveness. Effective executive teams are key. It's not just what you're doing and saying. It's how you model. It's how you present, how you show up, how you engage. And then that third one, organizational leadership, or better said, organizational impact. How does that group of 10, 12, 14 of you conduct yourselves when it comes to your role, your priorities, your curiosity, your demeanor, all of that, in ways that will create a cultural ripple, a wake all the way through the organization, down to your 50th employee if you're a 50-person organization, or 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 or bigger.
So insightful.
Good.
I mentioned earlier about the valuable resources you have on your website. And one of those that's also discussed in the book that I found valuable was the one-page role-specific business plan. For our listeners, what is that and why is it so helpful?
Yeah. So when you look at a lot of the brain research as to how people perform, how people transform, what happens is if you can focus on the priorities that matter most, if you've got those in front of you, and then if you regularly review them, so you have your high payoff activities in front of you and you regularly review it, what happens is you will begin to inhibit the noise and the things that are good, but maybe not great. So you say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. In businesses, most of our clients are playing a role or leading a business or function or department where the business plan is 47 pages and it's very complicated, and a lot of energy goes into building that plan. And then where organizations fall down is when the leaders stop reviewing the plan, but they don't have time to review all 47 pages on a regular basis. So what we do is we help our clients to extract from the 47-page plan, all of the key things they need to focus on in order to be the best performers in their role. So what are the goals you're responsible for accomplishing in the quarter ahead and the year ahead, quarter by quarter, year by year? What are those high payoff disciplines, those non-negotiable disciplines? There's 3 to 6 of them. And if you just spent the majority of your hours at work focusing on these 3 to 6 disciplines, the organization would crank. The problem is you have 18 other things making their way to your calendar. And then the third element are the improvements or the projects. And you're responsible for the oversight of those so that they get executed with excellence on time. And when you have these three things on one page, you're now able to communicate with your executive assistant if you have one, or you're able to, inform how you calendar in ways that will cause those disciplines to be appointments that are non-negotiable on your calendar. So you start saying no to things. You start delaying things that just don't matter as much. You delegate them, you get rid of them. And that one-page business plan, it's there to serve you. It's kind of your day-to-day, week-by-week tactical GPS. You focus on that, and it will help you to flourish. And there's a business in your backyard there. And I remember, I don't know, probably 2008. I was working with one of the executives, and he had never seen a one-page business plan. And he said, my gosh, this is a game changer for me. Our entire leadership team's using it. And he said, not only did I like it being on one page, but I wanted it to be carried around in their pockets. So we've shrunk it down to a 4x6 and we hold it. And hey, what you focus on and what you understand, you'll do it. So you keep it in front of you. You adjust them quarter by quarter. We've been running our company this way for years, and makes it easier.
Yeah, another thing you say that certainly resonated with me was that great leaders don't focus on solving problems. They equip others to do so. And I've always felt that the mark of a great leader is someone that could disappear for a month and their organization just continued to thrive.
Yeah, I love it. And that's true. Yeah, I think another way to say that is you want to lead an organization that wants you but doesn't need you. And
That's awesome.
yeah, of course that breaks down at some point. I mean, they're going to need you. If they don't need you, then why are you taking the paycheck?
Exactly.
But, over a period of time, you bet they should all be equipped. Yeah. Another thing that I always work with leaders on, Clint, is that the higher you climb on the ladder, the leadership ladder, so rung by rung, comes with moving from the individual contributor to the department manager to the function manager to the district, the regional, however you go up, right? Well, the higher you climb up a ladder, the fewer the decisions you should be making. Look at the volume of decisions that you make. The volume of the decisions you should make that are big for the business should decrease the higher you get, because you've done such a good job of coaching and equipping those below you on those lower rungs with more optics on the elements of the decision. So they're making the majority of the day-by-day decisions. And when you're up on the top of the ladder, you're making the big decisions, the big strategic decisions, the decisions where you have many differing perspectives and somebody's head's got to be on the line. You've heard everybody. We're all in it together, but ultimately I'm making the D. And you shouldn't need to be making those every 15 minutes
Right.
when you're up on top.
Yeah. Now, when you were discussing the final perspective called the outsider, you used the story of a surfing trip to the Maldives as an example. And by the way, that's a bucket list location for me as well, but we'll table that for an offline conversation. Can you recount the story for the listeners and tell us why having access to outsiders is so important?
Yeah. So now you're talking about one of my most favorite subjects, which is surfing. And yes, it is a bucket list trip. And yes, you should go. Oh my gosh, yes. Ridiculous. So we were in the Maldives, my wife and I, for our 25th wedding anniversary. We received this ridiculous 5-star anniversary gift from clients, which blew my mind. And I've been surfing since I was a teenager. I'm 56. So this was 7 years ago. And with this beautiful gift came the opportunity to work with 2 coaches, professional surfers, husband and wife from South Africa. They were stationed over at this property, this Ritz over in, not Ritz, Four Seasons over in the Maldives. And it's an organization called Tropic Surf. So what they did with me, they would take us out on a boat every day. They would take us to these different breaks. There'd be maybe 8 of us on the boat. The other 7, they'd give the other 7 a little lay of the land, like, okay, the point's over there. That's where it's good. Watch out for the shallow reef over there. The currents will take you this way. And if you see us do this, come back to the boat. And the rest would get off. And then they'd keep me there. And they'd say, all right, Daniel, we want you to really understand the spot. That tree right there, that's your takeoff spot. Watch that one reef post out there. They'd say, they'd give me all of the details. They'd ask me what I was going to be working on. They'd get my head in the game. I'd paddle out. They'd paddle out there shortly thereafter with cameras. I'd have one of them sitting next to me. One of them would be, a little further in with the camera. Surf, surf, surf. They'd allow me to do my thing. And then we'd go back, have lunch, and I would sit in their hut and we would watch every single move. And we would tear every move apart. And what I saw in my head versus what was on the TV screen were two different things, because I actually believed I was much better. And I realized, I'm just not that good after decades. This is awful. But those voices went away. And what they said was, if you just turn your head this way a little bit, and if you move your arms this way, that move's going to be beautiful. And they just kept sharpening and kept encouraging me. And then in the water, we'd go out that afternoon and work on those few pointers. Oh my gosh. Within a week, my surfing, I grew as a surfer so much from that fundamental coaching. And now it's even more enjoyable for me. I'm more confident in the water. I take more time. I don't spastically react to the crowd. It was a game changer. It was like 5 days with these guys. And as I sat there and I listened to them, Shane and Carrie, as I listened to them, I just thought, man, what they're doing for me is what we do for leaders in business and life every day. It's a game changer. We had a place in Mexico a few years later, and we actually had them come in, and they spent time with my family and hung out with us and did some more surf coaching. And yeah, they're game changers. So we could talk surfing all day long, Clint. You better shut me up.
No problem. I just love that story because of the way you describe it in the book, and the fact that in your head, you were nailing it, only to get back and have these experts tell you, well, really not so much, but then make you better. And I think that's really powerful. So I have one last question for you, because I want to be respectful of your time. In the book, you tell the story of Horst Schultz and his view of outsiders, which I found particularly impactful for me because we see it every day in our work. And outsiders that you trust, they don't really have a hidden agenda other than to make you successful. They can ask the hard pointed questions that others can't. They offer a different perspective than those inside the company who are so close to the issues. And as you put it, can't see the forest for the trees. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, let me tell the folks who Horsty is. Horsty was one of the founders of the Ritz-Carlton hotels. He's amazing. He's one of the most passionate visionaries that you'll ever meet. And when you talk net promoter score, this guy can tell you need to lead an organization that's got the highest NPS. And organizations he serves as a consultant or as a board member, they always do. So, what he and I both share in common is you can bias. You can bias your client. You can bias people around you, your outsider, and you don't want to do that. Don't waste your time. You want to have an outsider that cares enough about you to where they know their only job is to help you to flourish and be the best version you can be in your role in the business. And then the best ones will then go beyond that. And they want you not only to be so good in business that, the business gains beautiful rewards, but they want you to do it in a way that enables you to be the best version of who you are as a human. So they want you to be the best you can be in business and in life. And when you find that kind of an outsider, hang on to them, man. They're gold. And you prepare for those times, and you listen and you ponder and you challenge them to be, truthful with you and to challenge you. There's an old Hebrew scripture. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so shall one man sharpen another. You want sharpeners. None of us ever get to that place to where we know it all. We figured it all out and we're the best that we can be. We just don't arrive.
And I think that's a perfect way to end. So Daniel, thank you. You've been an awesome guest. Thank you for spending time with us today. If someone wants to learn more about you or engage with you further, or buy the book and learn what Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid teaching his student has in common with what we've been talking about today, how can they do that?
So you can go to the 7perspectives.com, just 7perspectives, number 7perspectives.com. That website will take you to the resources that Clint was talking about, as well as at the bottom of it, there's some videos there that you can watch, but at the bottom of it, you can buy it from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Apple iBooks, and Baker Bookhouse. Baker Bookhouse is the publisher. Right now, they're the cheapest. So you probably want to buy from them. And then if you're interested in buying in bulk for your business, there's contact us there. If you want this to be a framework you use with your organization, we have executive teams that do half day, full day, day and a half retreats. This is the language and how they run their businesses here in the US and internationally. And you can learn more about me by just checking me out on LinkedIn or Facebook, Daniel Harkavy, Harkav as in Victor Y. And then Building Champions is my company, and that's just www.buildingchampions.com.
Awesome. Daniel, thanks for the conversation.
Clint, thank you for having me. A pleasure.
Mine, for sure.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett. To find out more about Clint, go to projectsuccess.com or pick up Clint's book, The Project Success Method, at amazon.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.